Bonjour tout le monde. Exceptionnellement, je vais présider cette assemblée en attendant notre collègue M. Moore.
I will be chairing this committee while we wait for our colleague Mr. Moore. First of all, I would like to thank our witnesses for coming to share their experience for this study.
So I'd like to introduce our witnesses. We have Mr. Henry Storgard, Paralympic Committee Canada. Good day. Mr. Peter Montopoli, Canadian Soccer Association. Lane McAdam, Director, Sport Excellence, Sport Canada. Mr. Graham Brown, Rugby Canada. Chris Jones for the group Sport Matters. And Mr. Pierre Lafontaine from Swimming Canada. Good morning, one and all. Thank you very much for your attendance. And I should advise you that we have to step up the pace this morning, 7 minutes apiece instead of the usual 10, because we'd like the time to have you take questions. I'll let you know when you have 1 minute left, when you're at the 6 minute point. It doesn't mean I'm not putting up my hand to speak. I'm just telling you 1 minute. And then we'll start immediately with Mr. Henry Storgard.
It's a pleasure to be here to share with you information on the Canadian Paralympic Committee and our athletes and coaches who are preparing for London. So I'm the CEO. I proudly represent the 150 athletes and 40 coaches who will be representing our country in London in less than, I think it's less than 90 days at this point in time. Paralympic athletes are athletes with a physical disability. Many of them have been victims of accidents or other events that have caused them to not be able to participate in able-bodied sport and have an option to carry on their career in sports or to carry on in their active lifestyles through parasport and Paralympic sport. I want to share with you that my story really begins in Vancouver 2 years ago with the Vancouver Paralympic Games. Canadian Paralympic Committee was not particularly, or athletes were not particularly well known among Canadians at that point in time until the Games and the broadcast of the Games. 14 million Canadians watched our Paralympic athletes compete in sledge hockey, cross-country skiing, and numerous other events. Our success in Vancouver was outstanding. We placed third in the world, which for us is a significant accomplishment. It also brought us a great deal of awareness and pride. I think all of you will recall that coming out of Vancouver, all Canadians had a greater sense of pride and confidence and realizing that they too could go for gold in whatever endeavor that they chose. So Vancouver has been very good to the Canadian Paralympic Committee, and as a result of that, our funding from the Government of Canada has increased, and that funding has enabled us as an organization to secure private sector funds, corporate funding as well. And we've made a commitment to Sport Canada and the Government of Canada that we will match their funds within the next 2 years. Right now, we get 65% of our funds from the Government of Canada and about 35% from private sector. We are very grateful for that funding. It's enabled us and our athletes to compete at the top level in the world. To give you an example, one of our athletes, Michelle Stilwell, is a wheelchair racer, along the lines of Chantal Petitclerc, who I'm sure that you've heard of, is one of Canada's top Paralympian, having won 5 gold medals in Beijing. Michelle, recently we were able to provide her with a new wheelchair, the highest end state-of-the-art racing wheelchair that you could buy anywhere that you could buy in the world. And Michelle, since she got that new chair, which is a construction of carbon fiber and titanium, has set 3 world records in her lead up to the Paralympic Games. This is an incredible accomplishment for this young lady as we go forward. And just to give you an idea, a chair like that for a top racer in the world is worth somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000. We also, on the other end of that spectrum, we are investing $500,000 annually in para-sport equipment for children in communities all across Canada and in schools all across Canada. We are asking those communities to match our $500,000 contribution and to make that $1 million program. And that's been running successfully for many years, and through the good graces of both the government and our corporate sponsors, we've been able to enhance participation of children with physical disabilities in sport. Another interesting program is our Soldier On program that we are partners with National Defense. These are soldiers, men and women, who have come back from war, who are injured, and we have a Paralympic training program that we operate in partnership with National Defense to assist these soldiers to get back into sport or an active lifestyle. And we have a few of these soldiers on our Paralympic teams. I would specifically like to tell you or share with you that Paralympic sport is a vital expression of physicality and for fundamentally men and women who like to compete at the highest level of athletics. We are not going to London for a hug. We are going to London to win gold medals on behalf of Canada and Canadians. The resolve of these young men and women is extraordinary, I can assure you. I witness it every day. And they will proudly represent and inspire all Canadians in their competition in London through their accomplishments and through what they are able to do based on their disability and their ability. So in wrapping up, I would like to say that this is going to be a very special Paralympic Games because London and England is the home of the Paralympic movement. The genesis of it was when British soldiers came home from war. They started a Paralympic Games activity to help rehabilitate soldiers. So it's got a lot of meaning to the Paralympic world, and we are delighted to represent our country at these games. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storgard, and now we'll move to Mr. Montopoli.
Thank you very much. I am Peter Montopoli. I am the General Secretary for the Canadian Soccer Association. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having myself here representing the largest participation sport in the country. I think many of you are aware of that. We see that each and every day. We see that each and every evening, whether it be during the day or on weekends, where the parks and the communities and the fields are being used to the max for our sport. We are proud to be the largest participation sport in our country with 850,000 participants, and also very proud that 42% of our participants are female. That's 355,000 participants. In terms of the global perspective, the number of female participants we have competing, it's third in the world behind United States and Germany. I think that's a strong tribute to the sport, the people in the sport, and the communities that we have both extensive male and female participation at the grassroots level. I will inform you that 44% of all youth play the sport of soccer in their community. So as you can see, this sport from a participation point of view is fully entrenched in the communities across the country. I think I've been asked to speak here more in terms of the Olympics. I think I can go on and on about many things about our sport. I'd love to on another day. but we will stick to the agenda, the women's national team program that has qualified for the second consecutive term for the Summer Olympics, this time for 2012. And really, part of that success, and maybe part of the Canadian Soccer Association, our communities in growing the sport, but in large part is through the Government of Canada, through Sport Canada, through On the Podium, and funding our elite team, our elite program to be one of the best in the world. Certainly no lack in funding for this program that has now reached one of the highest levels in the world. We are currently ranked number 7 in the world, but we have just come off winning the 2011 Pan American Games gold medal, a first for our country in the Pan American Games for women's soccer. And arguably, we have probably at this point in time the best women's player in the world in Christine Sinclair. I think all of you have heard of her, seen her, and we're very excited about her participation in the Summer Olympics. This past week, we held a match in Moncton versus China. She scored in the last play of the match, the last seconds of the match, for us to earn a victory over China, and now has positioned herself as the 3rd highest goal-scoring female in the history of international soccer, only behind 2 that are at the highest levels. We do expect that when she has completed her career, which we hope has many more years to go, that she will be the highest scoring female in the history of women's soccer. And I think that's quite a tribute not only to her, her community where she grew up, but our national team program and all of us as Canadians to be very, very proud of her success. She was a flag bearer for Canada at the Pan American Games. We introduced a new head coach into the program in September of 2011. He energized the program. He brought new belief, new tactics, and just a new foundation of support for that program that needed it at that point in time, so much so that we really, really believe in the program that he's devised and the commitment of the athletes that we can be Canada's first team medal sport in the Summer Olympics since 1936. That's our goal. That's our goal this summer, to be the team that wins that medal for Canada as a team in the Summer Olympics for the first time since 1936. This is what he has instilled in the players. Being with the players just this past weekend, they still believe that. They see that. The competition schedule that we put together for them is second to none. We played United States, and we'll play United States once again on June 30th in United States. We played Brazil, we played Sweden, we played France, all top 4 clubs in the world, and competed very well, had some draws, lost one match, beat the others. We are competing at the highest level possible in order for us to be successful as a country. We know as we enter into the Olympic Games, we are the first competition of the Olympic Games. We start 2 days before the opening ceremonies. The sport of football takes a long, long time to complete at the Olympics. And we've seen it happen before where a team that is successful, that goes very far, can actually take the country by storm and know that for 2.5 weeks the country is following this one team. We believe we have the players, we have the coach to be successful, to reach the pinnacle of international success at the Olympic Games. They are training in Vancouver currently as a residency program. They will be training in Europe just prior to the Olympic Games to do everything they can, and we can as a country, to be successful. I'd like to thank the government for their support not only of the team, of the Canadian Soccer Association, but also in 2012 when we hosted the CONCACAF Women's Olympic Qualification Tournament in Vancouver. The government supported us through the hosting program. We were able to fill the stadium, BC Place, 160,000 spectators throughout the course of the tournament, 25,000 sellout lower bowl playing championship match against the United States televised nationally, and we need to be doing more and more of that, and that's why on the heels of that success and success of our women's team, we did bid for the FIFA Women's World Cup 2015 through the support of the federal government, and we secured that bid in March of 2011, and now we are beginning to work on that competition. We were pleased 2 weeks ago to be here in Parliament in front of the Canada doors with FIFA President Blatter and the Minister of State for Sport to announce the official host cities for 2015 of Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Montreal, Moncton. So for the first time in our country, and I think this is one thing we really try and resonate in every speech we say, for the first time in our country, there's a competition that will be held, an international major competition that will be held coast to coast, from West Coast to East Coast and back at the same time. It's never happened before in our country. It'll never happen again. It's 6 provinces, 6 cities at the same time. That's how a FIFA competition is held. We are very excited at the prospect of every Canadian can touch and feel our sport, the Women's FIFA World Cup, which is FIFA's second largest competition, and it is the largest women's event of any kind in the world of any nature, sports, entertainment, arts, whatever you name it, it's the largest. So we have a lot of good things going on in the sport, but certainly in our sport, without the support of the federal government, it would be very, very difficult to achieve the goals and objectives we have stated out. We thank you for believing in the sport. We are the #1 participation sport. We hope to continue to grow. We do need more fields. We'd like to work with the government on that. But at this point in time, we believe our growth is at the highest level within our country, and our success is just on the edge of reaching that highest level of a medal at the Summer Olympic Games. And I'd like to thank the government, Sport Canada, and on the podium for your contributions and opportunity to speak here today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. McAdam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mesdames et Messieurs, merci, Monsieur le Président, chers députés, pour votre
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, thank you for this opportunity today.
heritage, whose mission is to enhance opportunities for all Canadians to participate and excel in sport. To fulfill our mission and contribute to the achievement of the Canadian sport policy goals, Sport Canada develops policies, provides financial support through funding programs, and undertakes a number of special initiatives. Sport Canada souhaite ainsi améliorer la capacité et la
We hope to enhance the sports system in Canada, enhance the capacity and coordination of the sports system, encourage participation, and hope that with talent and dedication we can achieve excellence in international sport.
many layers, ranging from the international level to national teams to provincial territorial programming, and obviously at the grassroots level. Sport Canada plays mainly at the international and at the national levels. Sport Canada funding is provided to contribute to the costs of individual athlete participation in high-level sport, to support national sport organizations such as soccer and Paralympics and other colleagues here, capacity to develop sport from the playground to the podium, to support national team programming such as our women's national soccer team, the training and competition, the coaching, the sports science and medicine support that goes into those programs, and to also help support hosting events across Canada. Sport Canada gère 3 programmes.
Sports Canada administers 3 particular support programs.
Is the primary funding vehicle for initiatives associated with the delivery of the Canadian sport policy. It has various streams, but its main focus is to support national sport organizations, Canadian sports centers. We have a network of centers across Canada, and various multi-sport service organizations. The total budget for 2012-13 for the Sport Support Program is $143 million, which includes targeted funding that is recommended through the On the Podium initiative, which I'll speak to in a moment. Le deuxième volet, c'est le programme d'aide aux athlètes.
The second stream is the Athlete Assistance Program, which contributes to improved Canadian performances at major international sporting events. It supports those athletes already in the top 16 in the world. There's over 1,800 international caliber athletes that are supported.
Approximately $27 million for direct financial support to our best, highest caliber athletes. The third funding program is our hosting program. Peter alluded to it a moment ago. It aims to enhance the development of sport excellence and the international profile of sport organizations by assisting them to host Canada Games and other international sport events in the country. I noted many members here today are from communities that have hosted events like the Canada Games and other level events in their communities. It supports events like the multi-sport events like the Vancouver Olympic Games, the 2015 Pan American and Parapan Games, international single sport events like the Women's World Cup Soccer, other multi-sport games targeting Aboriginal peoples or persons with a disability, and as I mentioned, the Canada Games program. The annual budget for that program is about $19 million. The handout that you have has a pie chart that shows the distribution of funds that is provided for the current fiscal year from the Government of Canada. Before discussing London preparation, I'd like to bring you back 4 years ago in Beijing, where our Olympic team consisted of 332 athletes, 186 men, 146 women. The goal put forth by the Olympic Committee on the podium and the Government of Canada at the time was to place in the top 16 nations by total medal count. I'm pleased to say that we achieved that result and actually did better, finishing tied for 13 spots with a total of 18 medals. The handout outlines Canada's ranking vis-a-vis other countries of the world. And that showed a distinct improvement from the previous quadrennial in Athens, where we finished 19th place and had 12 medals overall. Au niveau paralympique, le Canada a envoyé en 2008.
On the Paralympic situation, we sent 144 athletes to the Paralympic Games in Beijing. We came back with 50 medals, 19 gold, and we ranked 7th overall in the gold medal tally. Athletics and swimming are the sports where Canada had won the most medals, and as Mr. Storgard mentioned earlier, one specific athlete won 5. Chantal Petitclerc also established 2 world records.
I think last week you heard from the Canadian Olympic Committee identifying our objectives, our collective objectives for London. So in consultation with the Olympic Committee on the podium, the Government of Canada, the organization has set a top 12 finish for London. And based on our tracking of Canadian results leading into the Games, I'm pleased to say that Canada has won 17 medals across 10 sports, 3 each in rowing, swimming, 2 in cycling, diving, equestrian, and 1 in each athletics, boxing, canoeing, gymnastics. These are World Championship level medals leading into the Games. And while the top 12 finish is ambitious, we believe it is achievable. In those sports where Canada has medal potential, it will be dependent, however, on the continued success and health of our top athletes. This is not an exact science. Obviously, athletes need to perform on the given day, and a week later is obviously a bit too late. So, but again, it's not an exact science, but we feel very strongly that these athletes are well prepared going into London. Au niveau paralympique, pour que l'équipe...
Once again, for the Paralympic expectations, we want to continue Canada's tradition as a leading nation in Paralympics and to build upon recent successes at the Vancouver 2010. We hope to be in the top 8 finish this time around with a gold medal count at least equal to.
Again today, the role of an organization called Own the Podium. It was created in 2006 in partnership with the Government of Canada, the Canadian Olympic Committee, and the Canadian Paralympic Committee. And it was based on a shared resolve to achieve success at future Olympic and Paralympic Games. It's providing focused leadership and common policies for both our winter and summer programs, and it makes funding recommendations to the national funding partners based on expert analysis and provides advice to national sport organizations in the development of their high-performance programs. The Government of Canada's financial support for our teams going into the London quadrennial, if you compared the Sydney quadrennial in 2000, the 4 years leading to Sydney, the funding has actually tripled in terms of our Paralympic and Olympic programming. If you compare the last quadrennial in terms of Beijing, the funding has actually increased by 40%. So we feel that we've provided the most significant funding ever to our Olympic and Paralympic teams as they head into major international competitions. I'll leave it there for now, Mr. Chairman, and look forward to your questions. Merci.
Thank you. Now we'll move to Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it's an honor to be here with you today to discuss Canada's preparations for the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games in London. In 2009, the International Olympic Committee selected rugby and golf as 2 new sports into the Olympic family. So we're actually not in the 2012 Olympics rugby as a sport. We're in the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. However, that doesn't change the fact that we're equally as committed to winning a medal, both men and women's sevens in 2016. We started that quest yesterday with a game on the Hill where we invited politicians from all parties and media to prepare our athletes for 2016. So fortunately, we did that at the beginning of our preparation and not at the end. Rugby as a sport has a long history, and sevens rugby, albeit new, has been a sport that has been readily and has been aggressively adopted in Canada because of its Olympic involvement. Our men are currently a top 12 country in the world. We are not supported by OTP, but our goal is to be supported by Own the Podium and to finish in the top 10. We are on the world circuit, so we represent Canada in 10 tournaments around the world in a Grand Prix format, and our goal next year is to finish in the top 10 in the men. In terms of our women's rugby, we're currently ranked #1 in the world in women's rugby. We have our last 7 tournaments. We've won 5, finished second in 1, and third in the other. We are traditionally a strong rugby nation in women's 15s, and we believe that our athletic base and the way that we approach team sports in Canada will ensure that our women will win gold in 2016 in Rio de Janeiro. Our funding support for our rugby is multifaceted. We believe in the business model where our funding comes from multiple sources, not just government. However, we wouldn't be able to field our men's and women's program without the support of the Government of Canada, whether it be through Sport Canada and our hosting program, through the Athlete Assistance Program, or through the General Sports Support Program that supports all of our athletes in the development of rugby across Canada. Own the Podium, whom our women are supported, have provided us an opportunity to take our women and present them on the world stage, and in my opinion, to ensure that they stay #1 for the next 5 years. And we hope that our relationship with Own the Podium will continue to grow and that we will be able to offer our women the absolute best possible chances of following Peter's gold or silver or bronze that he will win in London this summer. With all the colleagues that we deal with in Canadian sport, I think we're all very fortunate to have a collective body that works together in Canadian sport, whether it be at the COC, Sport Canada, Own the Podium, or all the other collective bodies that support our coaching program, our officiating programs. But the real focus that we have is on our athletes. And although we can always say that we've prepared enough, whether it be 2012 or 2016, the true measure of competing for Canada is allowing our athletes to compete without any distractions. And I'm not sure whether we do that on a regular basis or whether we do that on a daily basis, but I can tell you that all of the sports that are preparing for the Olympic Games are trying to provide our athletes with the absolute best preparation, both in the lead up to the Olympic Games, but also when they're done and they come home from the Olympic Games, whether they win a medal or not. And I believe that the support that we can give our athletes will be paramount as they represent Canada, and it's probably the greatest thrill that they will have is representing their country, but it's also the greatest honor they'll ever have. So on behalf of Rugby Canada, although we're not in 2012, we are in 2016, we hope that this is the first step to preparing our athletes to both medal and podium in 2016. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the invitation to present here today. Le groupe Sport est important représente des intérêts collectifs du sport.
Our group, Sport Matters, represents sports in Canada. Since its inception, we are working towards the advancement of public policy, which advances certain physical activities in sports sectors.
Parliament Hill, during which we met with 90 MPs and 5 ministers. Our theme that day was to promote the concept of from playground to podium. This theme is relevant to the inquiry your committee is presently undertaking in relation to the preparations for the London Olympic and Paralympic Games this summer. My comments are confined to a discussion of the background context in which Canadian children and youth are provided with the necessary physical literacy, physical education, recreational access, and sporting opportunity, which will, over time, it is hoped, result in an expansive pool of high-performance athletes from which to draw upon. Permit me to say that the sector is grateful for the foresight and enlightened thinking that led the federal government in its recent 2012 Economic Action Plan to protect the funding that is allocated to core sport, high-performance sport, athletes' assistance, the Canadian sports centres, and participation. Coupled with the decision to reauthorize funding for the Own the Podium agency in the aftermath of the 2010 Vancouver Games, this latest decision is to be commended for it demonstrates recognition of the critical role that the federal government plays in providing leadership to the entire sports system. Additionally, the Canadian sport policy renewal discussions in which I have been privileged to participate and in which the federal government has played a key role have been an exemplary exercise in consultation, outreach, and cross-sectoral vision. The final document, which will be presented to FPT ministers later this month, has considerable strengths and virtues and should serve as a strategic roadmap for sport in Canada over the next decade. Now, notwithstanding these sound decisions in recent years, some of the key benchmarks in the sport world continue to move in the wrong direction. Very quickly, broader sport participation rates at the community level continue to stagnate. Private sector investments in sport, while still healthy, have been strained somewhat by the global economic downturn of 2009. 1/4 of Canadian adults are obese, 1/4 of Canadian children aged 2 to 17 are overweight or obese, and the economic costs of obesity rise as high, according to some, as $7.1 billion. Data from several provinces suggest that community recreation infrastructure continues to be in need of repair or investment. The deficit has been estimated to be in the order of $15 billion. Some regions of the country, such as Alberta and the North, are considerably underserved by recreational and sporting infrastructure. Due to the influx of Canadians to Calgary, that city has a multi-billion-dollar need for new infrastructure. Finally, 43% of Canadian schools fail to deliver on the primary outcomes of the physical education curriculum. Hence, many kids fail to develop the necessary building blocks of physical literacy and are unable to pursue sport with any degree of confidence. During our Advocacy Day on Parliament Hill, the sport, physical activity and recreation sectors, supported, I should add, by the Heart and Stroke Foundation, had 3 main asks. First, the federal government should continue to make a robust, sustainable and predictable commitment to funding for both the core and high-performance sports system. Secondly, and this is more of a stretch target, 2% of the $200 billion currently spent on conventional health care by all levels of government should be redirected towards physical activity, recreation and sport as health promotion and prevention measures. And finally, the Government of Canada should, when fiscal circumstances permit, reinstate the Recreational Infrastructure Canada program in order to remedy the multi-billion-dollar recreation and sport infrastructure gap. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Finally, Mr. Lafontaine.
Mr. Moore, thank you for the opportunity. You guys are good. I actually don't have much left to say. They said it all, but my name is Pierre Lafontaine. I'm the CEO and the national swimming coach, which is a different role than most other sporting organizations. Normally they have a CEO and they have a national coach. I moved here 7 years ago from Australia because the Canadian swimming program was in disarray. They hadn't won a medal at the Olympics for several Olympic Games. I'm Canadian from a suburb of Montreal, but had left the country in early 80s. And one of the main reasons I decided to come back was because I felt that in Canada, the world of winning was possible again. People talked about winning, and it was a right. It wasn't like everybody's got the kumbaya approach. Everybody's got to be nice to everybody, you know. So following my arrival, Alex Bowman came. Alex was living in Brisbane. I was living in Canberra. But my sports represents, Peter, 100,000 members, but 2 million kids that take swimming lessons. So not that I'm competitive, but there's more kids that swim than they play soccer. And in the process, thinking about coming here, I was going, how do you dress up, you know? So I thought maybe I'll come in my Speedo, but I thought it might not be the best thing for all of us. But coming in the plane, moving from Australia, I remember my buddies, my swim coaches in Australia go, what? You're going to Canada? Like, they're so bad in swimming. What are you doing? And I had a group of kids on the pool I coached. I had 16 kids. 8 of them were Olympic gold medalists. And I would come to Canada, and the whole country hadn't won 1 gold medal since 1992. So even sometime I'd go like, what am I doing? But, you know, regardless of where you live around the world, Canada is where you come from. It's always Peter, your heart. And even when I was coaching in the U.S. and coaching in Australia, there was always a piece of me going, man, like, we got to be better. And swimming is such a summer sport for Canada. It is what we do. We go sailing, we go boating, we go in the backyard pools, we go to the lake. It is the Canadian thing to do in the summer. And to me, part of my discussion with you today is not just about the Olympics, but the power of what the Olympics do to a nation. Because we should be the first nation in the country that actually talks about being zero drowning. You probably don't know, but there's over 600 kids a year that drown in Canada. And every one of those are somebody's daughter and son, and I would hate to think that we don't apply ourselves to a preventable disease such as drowning, that we don't fight like crazy to make sure that every child in Canada knows how to swim, because that's how you enjoy Canada in the summer. When I got here in 2005, we started a new strategic plan. Our plan was to have a family-friendly organization, create an environment where every kid is safe, where there's respect for each other, there's integrity within the program, there's commitment and accountability to our coaches, to kids, to our coaches, to parents. And you all know that there's no child or kids sports without volunteers. And if it wasn't for volunteers in this country, we wouldn't have sports. I know not long ago in one of the budget in the government, we've added a tax credit for volunteer firefighters. And I would beg you one day to consider finding ways to get our volunteers across the nation that helps our youth program to move and find ways to recognize these people. I do believe that On the Podium actually starts at On the Municipalities. That's where the dream of ever be on the podium at the Olympics or the Paralympic program is ever involved. My Olympic team, we've made our selection in Montreal at the Olympic pool. We've been doing it since I've been back. The Olympic pool is our history. It's where people dream and great things happen for Canada. I was always hurt through the 2010 Olympics when they were saying that, oh, we won the first gold medals on Canadian soil ever at our Olympic Games. I could tell you that if it wasn't for the drug these Germans in 1976, your swimmers alone would have won 4 gold medals. And we're still suffering, and some of these kids are still suffering today because of that concept. Also, your swimming team was also the first sport to have a combined Olympic and Paralympic trials together. These kids are in the same pool, they train in the same pool, they're the same family, coached by the same coaches. And so it was a really great success. We had over 800 kids from around the country, over 5,000 spectators that watched it on TV, close to 100,000 on webcasting. And your team is now composed of 31 swimmers, 13 male, 18 females. We're ranked about anywhere between 10th and 12th at the Olympic Games. And I want to talk to you a little bit of what we've done the last 4 years, just to kind of prepare you for where we're going. We've planned 3 medals. That was our goal in 2005, and to create an environment to allow us to have 3 medals. That means program for coaches, program for clubs, program for developing officials, and so on. But also, let me just talk to you about the last 4 months, and it's been quite exciting. We had a camp in Arizona. We brought the whole team. We brought sports psychologists, nutritionists, and so on. But we also partnered with the Cirque du Soleil. And the reason we partnered with the Cirque du Soleil is because it's one of the greatest organizations in the world in their art. They're great athletes. I approached them and I said, you know what, I want to associate my organization with the best in the world and the best Canadians. And they were so excited to work with us. We ended up in Las Vegas in September for 5 shows, and our swimmers trained with their artists. And then when we came back at the Olympic trials, the next day we went to the new show in Montreal and trained with them for a day and basically shared what was about being the greatest in the world. And that was really exciting for us. Our camp in a couple of weeks is in Italy prior to the Olympic Games. We're going to spend 2 weeks in Italy. The reason we're going there, I just felt that if we go on the British Isles, there's going to be so much hype. It's just too much. And so we're going to stay in a little town. There's like 7,000 people, and the mayor of the town loved swimming, and he put a 50-meter pool in the middle of this little village. So it's going to be nice in Sardinia. And the reason I'm telling you this is because the power of the sport, I believe, is to inspire Canadians. It's to make every single child to think that, my goodness, it's amazing to be Canadian, number one. And fitness and the role of a child, the job of the child is to play. And I strongly believe that part of our role here is to create an environment where every kid wants to do something. It doesn't have to be swimming. I'd love that. 10 million kids that swim would be great. And then they get so hot in soccer that they'd have to come and swim. So that's why it's really important that we teach swimming to these kids. But I also believe that the power of teams and the power of sport is how we could use sport in schools to engage kids. I think our boys are having trouble in schools, and it's certainly one of the biggest tools to engage boys in schools. And I could tell you I've got 2 boys, and if it wasn't for sports, I'm not sure they'd still be in school. So I'm a big fan of sport in school and what it does to them in terms of building everything that goes, which is learning to lose, learning to win, be a teammates, be a proud Canadian. At the end, for me, it's about building dreams for Canadians and using our power to do that. In 1988, for you to understand the growth of the Olympic movement, in my sport, there was 80 countries, 1988. This year, 185 countries that are competing in swimming. Something like 210 or 205, I think, in track and field. So it doesn't get any easier. It gets harder and harder and harder. And I could tell you the more and more government around the world are using sport as a platform to sell what they do. So the power that we have in our medals is what the medals will do post-Olympic Games to engage Canadians, to engage every child in the country. I couldn't do it without the Government of Canada, and I know we've all said this, but I'm telling you, there's no way we could do it without Sports Canada on the podium, COC, the CHPC. But even the messaging that's been taken out there now with you guys, we're talking about with the government saying, we believe in sport and the power of sport. We're going to keep funding this. Because what it did to our athletes, it made them go, wow, they believe in us. You know, so if it's to be, it's up to me. And I do think that it was a great message. I could tell you that my swimmers around the country are excited to represent you. They're, like Peter, they're not going there to participate. They want to go there and make you proud. They want to be there to engage the 40,000 swimmers that we have in our swim club, the 1.5 million kids in our swimming lessons. That's why they do it. They do it for themselves too. But, you know, I think at the end, the fun thing is they want to get their tattoo of their maple leaf on their heart. And that's one of the great things that swimmers want to do. We can't do it without TV. We can't do it without great ethics in this country against drugs. I think we've got to fight like hell, excuse the expression, to make sure that we keep clean sports. We have problem with banned coaches that are still coaching on pool decks or soccer field or hockey arena. We've got to do everything we can to stop that. And I'm going to close up with a few things where I think we have to find ways to build great after-school programs. That's where it all starts. That's where the kids in the school need to be engaged. I think the message that we should and can be the fittest nation in the world is what we're about. I'm telling you that if you pass those messages for us over here, your sport group will do it for you. But we need the vision to be created out there saying we deserve to be the fittest nation. Not any different than our children deserve the best school system in the world, but there's no reason we're not the fittest nation in the world. Through Mr. John Weston on Saturday, we started the first health and fitness day in Canada where we've pushed the municipalities to open every facilities in their communities for free on the first Saturday of the month of June to promote healthy living and active living. Sports Day in Canada is September 29th. There's another great way to promote the sport in Canada. And I would love to challenge each one of you. The Terry Fox Day, which is I think the 16th or 17th of September this year, is an icon. I lived around the world. Is an icon around the world. Almost 1,000 races around the world that happened. And it brings Canadian. When I was in Australia, it brought every Canadian together. And I would love to think that we could get 308 MPs and 115 senators to go and run their Terry Fox run and pass the message that fitness is important. Be a healthy Canadian. Life is important for Canada. And I'm going to finish with Thursday morning I run a swimming lessons for MPs at Chateau Laurier, 6:45 to 7:30. I got about 15 of you guys that show up. So what I did is I actually brought swim caps for every one of you guys. So when we're done here, you guys can come and get the swim caps. And I expect you guys to be there. You don't have to wear Speedos. I'll provide goggles. Thank you very much. Actually, Ms. Joyce Smith, I think from Winnipeg, about 8 weeks ago came for the first time and swam in her life. Her brother had drowned and learned to swim in 45 minutes and swam a lap at Chateau Laurier. And I was probably one of the greatest days after 40 years of working with swimmers, one of my nicest day of my life about why I do what I do, and it's to change lives. and influence, people to make great choices in their life. So thanks. Go Canada, go.
Thank you, Mr. LaFontaine. Thank you to our witnesses. And now we'll move into our time for question and answer. And we're going to start with Mr. Young for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. I'd like to ask Mr. Montopoli, my town of Oakville, I'm told, has the highest number of coaches and players in Canada, which is 12,000. 12,000 young people and then coaches playing soccer. And I'm wondering how important this is in building your winning women's team, is these farm teams across Canada. That is like the soccer movement. What is the connection? How important is it to have that?
Well, first off, I compliment you on being the largest club in North America.
Oh, North America.
And compliments to you and your city for having the vision on how to do it correctly. And it's very wise of you to ask that question, because 2 of our players from your club are on our women's national team program. And they've come up through the system through excellent volunteers, administrators, and more importantly, through excellent coaching programs that you've implemented in your club. I think your city and your club has done probably the best job in Canada about promoting the sport and how to do it correctly from an infrastructure perspective, which is a key component in terms of usage of all the fields in your city, and having that under the umbrella of the Oakville Soccer Club versus many multiple clubs. And through that, the control of the system and the programs has been, I guess, uniform throughout, allowing players to understand what's required to be a national team player. So I do applaud your city and the work you've done to provide excellent players, both on the men's and women's, but especially on the women's side, where we count on your club to produce those players.
Thank you. Thank you. So we heard from Mr. Jones, a key health problem for Canadians, and particularly young Canadians, is obesity. And the elephant in the room, I think, is these wonderfully engaging video games that create couch potatoes, whereas it would be much healthier for our young people to be out playing a sport. And you said 44% of all youth play soccer, which is an amazing number. Can you comment on what our young people get out of soccer in relation to their health, but also other skills and disciplines?
Certainly, thank you. Really, the number one skill and discipline is being part of a team, leadership skills, team skills, friendships, and the opportunity, I think, in our sport where it's not about one player, one focus. Although in my presentation I talked about the best player in the world, and we should all be proud of that, but it's about a team and a team concept. It's not about yourself. So I think those other life skills, I believe, are taught through many of the sports. I guess I'm more familiar with our sport, more passionate about it, where you're part of a team to be successful. You're not that one individual to be successful. So in terms of relying on your teammates, being a competitor, being a leader, and you're part of a team to achieve greater success is probably what you're learning through our sport.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Storgard, the highest level of achievement at the Olympics and Paralympics is gold, but gold is really a symbol, I think, and it has a hidden meaning, and that is what everybody who worked to achieve gold, sort of what they learned along the way. I wonder if you can comment on what it does for Paralympic athletes to work towards achieving gold.
Thank you very much for that question. You're absolutely right. It's the journey, not the gold medal. I think that restores an individual's sense of pride and confidence and achievement, and to reflect on what Peter just said. You know, that ability to be part of a team, to compete, to be the best in the world. All of these things are vital to our athletes and to young children who have disabilities. We have research that identifies these children are isolated from society in large part. They don't have as many friends, nowhere near as many friends as other kids. And so it's vital for them to participate in sport, to have all those experiences that everybody else has in sport. So our athletes are an incredible inspiration for all Canadians. They visit schools throughout the country. They speak at service clubs. They are so proud to give back.
That's helpful. Thank you. Mr. LaFontaine, could you comment on how training in swimming and achievements transfer those skills and disciplines to other aspects of someone's life and other areas of endeavor? Because we often see how star athletes end up being achievers in whatever they do in life. Can you comment on how the skills transfer?
Great question. I'm sure very few parents will ever put their kids in sports to get to the Olympic Games. They do it to build all these great skills that you guys have brought. But what I find is that these kids are goal-oriented, often very goal-oriented, because that's one of the concepts we're going here in 3 weeks, 6 months, 2 years. I think they've also learned to be, to desire issues such as being a great team player, look at being leaders within their area. For me, in my sport, there's 6 lanes in the pool, and there's always the concept of concentration, attention to skills, attention to details, get ready for long-term approaches as competition. So I think there's so many great qualities that these kids do, but one of the main one I do believe is they're forced to plan their schoolwork. They're forced to plan their day-to-day organization so that they have to, if they swim at 5:30 in the morning, they have to make their lunch the night before. They have to do their homework. They have to do so many things that average kids don't do. And often athletes have a higher GPA at university than an average student. And on top of that, they represent their schools with great pride. One of the biggest challenges we have when we get to that point is we have a lot of our Canadian kids that go to U.S. colleges. In my sport, 150 of my best swimmers go to the NCAA system. And so we have to build our CIS college system where they want to stay in Canada and they want the pride to be on Canadian universities. They get wooed by scholarships. But I could tell you that most great Canadians that compete at the international level for Canada, and they do well in Canada, they stayed in Canada through the college system. They go to Canadian universities. For me, there hasn't been a Canadian that won a gold medal for Canada that competed in the U.S. before in terms of college system. So I think the qualities that we're looking for in terms of planning and long-term thinking and are the key, and that's the reason we put our kids into sports.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Nantel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci tout le monde pour votre...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their presentations. I'd like to refer to some comments made by Mr. Jones as to the importance of infrastructure at the municipal, local level, the concrete support that day-to-day living of Canadians and their families and their youth. Also, Mr. Montopoli, I have also a question for Mr. McAdam. Earlier this year, I was in Boucherville. There was a classic soccer game, over 100 teams of youngsters, and the technical leader, Madame Vayette, said, you see that little 8-year-old there, number 9? Well, our spotters are here, and we're going to make a class athlete of that. Now, I don't know. That's pretty specialized. She seemed to have a particular good eye for finding talent, a real talent spotter. Now, how important is federal funding to do this kind of thing, Mr. McAdam? Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Nantel. The contribution federally is very important, of course, and it's primarily used for federal activities, federal sports, a federal level of involvement. The mandate, however, is not just the development of a national team or an international team, international sports teams. We spoke of Oakville, for example, a little while ago, producing hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of young athletes. And it's through these systems and networks that we, in fact, can encourage talent, spot that talent, and encourage them to move up the ranks in the system. First of all, that they find some local support and regional and hopefully national, recognized by national authorities, and be given opportunities to train in a more professional, a more high-performance fashion. in order to compete eventually, one would hope, in a national team. Sports development is a little bit different for each sport or discipline. What we try to do on a national level, and of course I'm sure you've heard of the long-term development of star athletes, but it's a model that is applied generically to all sports in order to try to identify how we can develop certain skills and competencies so that they can continue to play at high-caliber events. I'm a soccer player myself. In a 90-minute game, you might be on the field for 3 minutes and have the ball under your control for maybe 3 minutes. That's not the way it is today. Today we do training exercises, we do 4-on-4s, we do all sorts of practices so that we can sniff out the talent a little more quickly and try to channel it a little bit better to get it to that level. Well, thank you. I'm glad to see that the support is there federally. I'm going to share my time with Mr. Dubé. I'll try to be quick, given the shortage of time. But first of all, I want to thank you all for your presentations, and also to tip of the hat for all our accomplishments and successes. All of you mentioned the significance of participation of youth, get them young. One of the items, I think, is that we might be victims of our own success. We are more and more aware of the possibilities of success. Standards are rising all the time. We're really out to get gold or to get medals, and it's a lot harder to get in as it was in the past. Now, perhaps viewed from that perspective, professionalization of sport, I think that it's still very important to have programs at a local level which would sort of pool talent and eventually feed into the system. What I'm trying to say, I used to coach soccer, and I would see some kids that would drop out because they felt that the program was rather lackluster, sort of patched together, not very well structured. Maybe the coaching staff wasn't particularly adept or well trained. Federal funding deals mostly with national sports, but I think that there should be a way to find some of it to trickle down to the local level so that we can improve the quality and the caliber of what we can offer at the grassroots level. What do you think of that kind of approach? And I'll start with Mr. Jones.
Two responses. The first is that there is now a movement that's gaining traction and foothold in Canada, and that's the Canadian Sport for Life movement. And it is attempting to teach parents and coaches about the sort of natural progression of a young athlete who in the first year should have a focus on fun and participation, on structured kind of play, and then over time to impart certain technical skills. I think, though, the issue that all governments need to grapple with at some point is the fact that in our school system there aren't enough qualified physical educators teaching sports. So what we have are generalists, English teachers, science teachers, teaching sport and physical activity to kids. And I think the legacy of that is we have, and I've heard this from various national sport organizations, we have 18-year-olds that the national sport organizations are teaching remedial athletic skills to, jumping, throwing, catching, that kind of stuff. And that's because there's been a failure in the system lower down in the school system. So I know that's not a federal jurisdiction, but I think that is an issue that over time we're going to need to grapple with.
Puis, je m'intéresse aussi à ce que vous avez dit, Monsieur Lafontaine.
I'm also interested in what you said, Mr. Lafontaine. I believe it was you that said it, a little bit like a tax credit for volunteers who might involve themselves in coaching. I think that's pretty interesting. I was a volunteer coach for a while, but that's not the point. I think that it would attract and it'd be an incentive to community participation, I believe. So I think that's a good element. Perhaps you might want to expand on that a little bit. I think that there's some, it's an interesting avenue that we could explore here. Yes, thank you. Well, you can see this from a number of different aspects. This reaction, this volunteer aspect is very, very important. It's an important, vital part. In 2004, Prime Minister Howard, the Australian, said that we know that in Canada and the States, studies have been undertaken to show that we have a large problem, excuse the pun, with obesity. 100 million were involved for after-school programs were devoted to that. The very first year, 180,000 youth attended. 85% of those had never participated in organized sports. So they took the ways and means to get into all of the schools.
School, that's where we played soccer, in the gym and so on. Alors, je pense que ça, c'est un des points majeurs.
So I think that's one of the major points. I think the relationship between national federations of sport and their provincial counterparts are very important, very important. It's not just the Olympic program and the rest, not at all. We need something that's integrated, something that's planned, so that a kid who's 4 begins to play soccer. There is a linkage right up to the top athletes. We don't want this to be stovepipes or isolated. The Coaches Association of Canada is working very, very hard to reevaluate their training and trainer program, coaching programs, to prepare coaching staff, which is much more in keeping and abreast of the technology today. So whether it's Fort John's or whether it's Toronto or Montreal, everyone will have access to these training programs. Thank you very much.
7 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to follow from that line of questioning. I want to talk about something that was said in the presentation, and I think Mr. LaFontaine mentioned it, own the municipalities, and also Mr. Jones. And I always thought, yes, the municipalities should also own their athletes and be proud to take credit for what it is that they have done. For example, back in the late 60s, there was a massive infrastructure program around the centennial celebrations, 100-year celebrations, I'm sure you're familiar with. Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of arenas built, hockey arenas especially. One of the hockey players involved in a stadium in a town called Bonavista was Michael Ryder. And you talk about paying dividends. They built this stadium many years ago. And just last year, the Stanley Cup was paraded through that particular stadium. So, it pays back in a way that's quite profound. And I think when it comes to the Alex Baumanns of the world, the Victor Davises of the world, that also pays off in the local pools. You brought up the rink program, which I think is something that we should give a serious consideration to resurrecting on a grander scale, because I do believe that the dividends are tremendous. So what you do is you have the municipalities in charge of their recreation, but with help about the infrastructure, because the smallest of communities have a hard time leveraging this money to help to create. Now, obviously, not every community is going to have a 50-meter pool, but they could certainly have a pretty good soccer pitch. They can have a pool where people can learn the basics and go from there to get them through college and maybe into the Olympics. I was wondering, do you think that smaller municipalities are crying for this once more?
I think it's our sense that it was an extremely popular initiative that had a lot of mayors in the queue and a lot of projects that were funded, and yet it probably only scratched the surface, and the deficit is still in the order of about $15 billion, and in some cases it's extremely pronounced because of demographic shifts and the arrival of new Canadians and so on. So I think one thing I would say, I think, that we saw in the Canadian sport policy process is that we need now to rationalize our resources so that maybe we create what are called multi-sport complexes, rather like the Germans do, where you're going to put a number of facilities together in one place. You might have a rugby training pitch, you might have an arena, you might have an indoor synthetic field. And, if an athlete shows an aptitude to a certain age and then the coaches decide that that kid could maybe do another sport, you could easily move him because the coaches would be there, the athletic trainers. And I think that particular model has some virtue that we need to look at. But as to the program, I think it has a lot of merits, and when circumstances permit, we should look at reauthorizing it.
So creating these play with the flexibility and the infrastructure that allows flexibility within the smaller communities, I totally agree. I want to jump topic now, get to rugby. Is there a pardon my ignorance on the sport of rugby, but is there a professional league that we participate in as Canadian athletes on a grander scale?
There is professional rugby around the world, but not in North America. So a majority of our men's particular national team players do play over in the UK.
Okay. Now, can we expect to see these athletes in the Olympics, the top players in the world?
Yes, all of our athletes that do go overseas to play all come back when we ask them to play for Canada.
Okay, all the professional athletes certainly are into the Olympics for rugby. All right, so New Zealand stands a good chance of getting a medal. South Africa, these nations. So this because in hockey, because in hockey, let's face it. I mean, right now, what supplants on the level of a World Cup of soccer is really the hockey gold medal. I think that's safe to say. It sounds like rugby could be the same. But what about for soccer now? We're not necessarily at that level, are we?
Well, in terms of our best players are playing on our men's and women's teams, absolutely 100%. In terms of the competitive level, again, on the women's side, we are second best in CONCACAF, which is our region of North America, Central America, and Caribbean countries. We're just behind United States, which is the #1 country for the last 15 years and running.
Yeah.
We have competed with them. On the men's side, and I'm glad Pierre brought this up because while swimming, track, and Olympics have a large majority of countries, nobody competes with FIFA. FIFA has 209 countries participating. It's the largest governing body in the world. So we are competing against 208 countries. And to be at the top level is a little bit more of a difficult proposition. Right. We are starting our qualification this Friday for men's World Cup. So we are halfway through the process in terms of qualification.
How do you, sorry, I didn't interrupt. I don't have a lot of time. When you sit down here by yourself, they don't afford you a lot of time. But well, I want to talk about the role of professionalism in a sense of what the money that it brings, because, you know, I mean, let's face it, the money that can be put into development associations for hockey simply because of the Canadian hockey team in the Olympics is phenomenal. Soccer, maybe not at that level, but rugby could be much the same. Maybe this is a question for Mr. McAdam. How do you mesh the amount of money that can be brought into the development associations when it comes to hockey, as opposed to something like swimming or maybe something a little more down the line, we'll say, no offense to the sport, but say fencing or something like that? I mean, obviously, they cannot garner the amount of commercial interests that other sports can. So, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for your question. Through the federal funding envelopes, there are kind of two yardsticks that we use to assess the investments that go into the various national sports that we fund. There's about 55 national federations that are financially supported by the federal government. The first is called, we have a policy tool called the Sport Funding and Accountability Framework, which assesses each sport based on their membership, the pan-Canadian nature of the sport, their international success. So there's a fairly objective tool that differentiates between one.
Well, that's what I want to get to. It is quite objective. Maybe I can just. Oh yeah. All right.
7-minute rounds, and that's 7 minutes. So that's how it works. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you all for your presentations. I don't quite know where to start, but I think I'll start here. I was very pleased in the last couple of months to see that Steve Nash has joined our national men's basketball program as an administrative level, and I think that's going to be a great addition to our sport in Canada, having him return to Canada and support us and help us out. When he was in high school, he played rugby, he played soccer, he played basketball, and he played those sports until he graduated high school. There's great pressure on young athletes that show any promise or any talent in any sport to focus on that sport, leaving other sports. I'm a person who believes that you should try to play as many sports for as long as you can, at least till you start high school. But there is great pressure and competition among coaches and community groups to try to draw the best talent, because many times the best athlete's the best athlete in all sports, particularly in smaller communities. I'm just wondering, Mr. Jones, maybe what are your thoughts on that issue?
Well, interestingly enough, Steve Nash went to the high school I went to in Victoria, which is Mount Douglas High School in Victoria. He then went on to another school locally, St. Michael's University School. I think, you know, we've heard Wayne Gretzky say this as well in the past, that he believed that you should play multiple sports while you're young and develop a lot of different skill sets. Now, there is a whole philosophy now around long-term athlete development, which says there are optimum stages and periods when you want to begin to specialize that athlete if they have potential. And so I think that there is some science there now that would suggest that there are early specialization sports and later specialization sports. I guess what you're referring to is kind of the professionalization of children's amateur sport. And there are some regrettable sides to that, and we see that in sport. We see that maybe in some hockey arenas at times, where overly enthusiastic parents are getting on the backs of the referees or the players, and that can turn some kids off. So I think there are some issues, and I think the sport policy process has been about educating parents and coaches and volunteers to say that, you know, it's about skill acquisition, it's about fun, it's about esprit de corps, it's about a lot of things. And I think with that, our general view is that when sport is done properly, it builds social capital, it enhances the local community. After all, as Peter would know, you know, in an era where so many of us are sitting in front of computer screens, on a summer's evening, parents meet on the sidelines, and they sit and they talk, and it builds social capital. They meet at pools, they meet at a lot of places. And so I think that overall it's a healthy development, but there are those extremes of where I think maybe we do specialize a bit too early. So.
Great. I said yesterday, or I guess it would have been 2 days ago at our last meeting, the coaches, we need, in Canada we have mostly volunteer coaches. Primarily when young people are coming up and they join a sport for the first time, it's a volunteer that's coaching them, whether it's a parent in their organization. And we do have training programs for coaches. But I think the volunteer coach is something that we have to treasure in Canada. In the United States, many times it's more professional. The coaches are getting paid at least a stipend, whereas in Canada, that doesn't happen very often. So you have to have the well-trained and certified volunteer coach. Then you need equipment, and you need a facility. You need those two things. And if you have those three things, you can usually develop a pretty good program without a lot of high costs and registration fees, because registration fees are definitely a hurdle, particularly students and children from less prosperous homes have to get over in order to participate even at a high level, even just to stay in shape. So if you have those three things, you have the volunteer coach, you have the facilities, and you have the equipment, then the registration fees can stay low and you can broaden that net at the bottom. Because I think what all of you have kind of touched on is it's kind of an inverted pyramid, where you want to get that base of people participating as large as possible and then focus on elite development as they move up that pyramid. Having that base as wide as possible is also something the federal government should be supporting, and provincial and municipal governments, because that is what's going to save us money in healthcare costs later on. Having people all start early and try and open the door to everyone and involve as many as possible. And focusing not only just on elite development, actually have that bottom of the pyramid as broad as possible. Am I accurate in saying you're all in support of that model? Maybe we'll start with Mr. McAdam.
Yes, I would suggest that, in fact, if you look at the sort of underpinnings of the long-term athlete development models that were pioneered by the Government of Canada, so that each sport has a single song sheet that understands the various aspects of sport development within the sport, whether it's a late development sport like rowing or cross-country skiing versus a early development sport like gymnastics. They're all going to look a little different in terms of how you identify athletes, what kind of skills do you provide to the athletes, what kind of training, what kind of qualifications you need for the coaches at various levels. So it all starts there. There's no question that the Government of Canada is doing some work around the FPT to ensure that there is cohesion around who does what, so that there's no duplication. There are certainly gaps, there's no question, but certainly efforts over the last 10 years during the first phase of the Canadian sport policy process to try and ensure better coordination amongst levels of government, identify those gaps, and ensure that there's efforts made to try and meet those, and make sure that we have qualified coaches that are training in those facilities and supporting those athletes in those facilities.
Thank you. I want to ask one last question to Mr. LaFontaine. In Australia is sort of well respected among sporting communities for their system, the system they have in Australia, which covers more than one sport, not just swimming, but other sports as well. Are they doing a better job? And if they are, how are they doing it at casting this broad net and involving more people at a younger age? What are they doing that we're not, that we could focus on?
It's a great question. In 1976 Olympics, I think Australia, if I remember well the numbers, they won 3 medals only. And in 1979, one of the federal MPs stood up in the House and said it was un-Australian not to be a powerhouse in sport for any Australians. So they built the Institute of Sport in Canberra, which is where I ended up working for several years. And basically it became a vision from the top down, and schools embarked it. And all of a sudden, because of that, so many other things fell into place. The company called TELUS actually would give any of their employees that were volunteers, they would give them 2 hours out of the 40 hours a week paid to go and coach little kids soccer or whatever. So it became a national vision, and then everything else fell into place. There's a huge, I could tell you that my kids were, it was mandated phys ed all the way through the high school. And I do think that it is one of the major issues, especially for girls, because often programs are left to the choice. A lot of the girls don't want to get sweaty in high school, and so the habits of fitness for the girls are not as good, and I think we have to work with that. I know education is a provincial program, but I also believe that people will embark if the vision is created for a nation. And and to go back to the Australian model, the other aspect is they're just 20 years ahead of us, and we're eating away at 2 years at a time to get closer to them. And the key is not just to get closer to them, but to get way better. Our coaching education system is the best in the world, and but we just don't have enough people to coach the coaches. I do think that I live in Chelsea, just north here. We've got 1,000 kids out of 7,000 people that play soccer. We can't find enough coaches and dads and moms. If I happen to drive by the soccer field, they'll lasso me in to coach soccer, and I know nothing about soccer. That's how desperate some of the, including hockey. So we do have to work, at building the base, and I do think also the other aspect, I'll close it here, would be to entice universities to have programs in phys ed, but specializing in coaching, not just in physical education, for example. There's only a few universities in Canada that do that.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Dubé, now we're into 5-minute rounds.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je veux continuer à poser...
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to continue with a few questions. I'll start with Mr. Stogard on the Paralympics. In my riding this last weekend, I spent a very pleasant evening with the People with Disabilities Club in the Richelieu area. They showed me around what kind of equipment they use, and as a fully abled person, I find that it's very difficult to manipulate some of this equipment. But equipment, technology, you talked about this very top-end chair for Madame Petitclerc. You mentioned also certain measures that could be taken and have been taken to support Paralympics and sports and all the consequences that this might have. Given the way technology changes, and given that we can't really make it easy for everyone who has a disability to participate, what could we do to try to further these initiatives to be of greater assistance to Olympians?
As a matter of fact, in Quebec, at the University of Sherbrooke, we have a number of we have researchers and research facilities that help develop equipment for athletes, for Paralympic athletes or athletes with a disability. So we're working very diligently, not only at the University of Sherbrooke, but with different universities across the country on research and innovation that allows athletes with disability to participate and to participate at optimum levels. It is very challenging. I don't know if anybody here has tried to get into one of the sledges that, in terms of playing sledge hockey. It's very low to the ice. It's not easy. It's challenging. And everything from, my good friend at rugby, we have wheelchair rugby as well. These are like chariots from the Roman times. But there's a tremendous amount of innovation and research going on. In terms of what else we can do, it's really financial resources in terms of focusing on that, and obviously working with more universities, more research organizations to help these people. We've seen a good example of an athlete, Oscar Pistorius from South Africa, who's a blade runner. He has 2 large blades. He's a double amputee. He's now trying to qualify for the Olympics. I think he has 1 event left over the next couple of weeks to see if he can be the first double amputee to do that. And I think it has great benefit because all the wheelchairs that are being built will benefit the general public, will benefit society. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but 4 million people, 4 million Canadians have a physical disability, and so...
Mon temps est un petit peu plus limité, fait que je vais me permettre de...
I don't mean to interrupt, but I have very limited time, so I'll jump in with another question. Innovation, of course, is very, very important. But when you mentioned the price of that chair, I think probably there's some financial obstacles to participation disabled athletes, or I should say athletes with disabilities, rather. They're not necessarily earning big salaries or anything like this. So are there other initiatives in place which would assist athletes with disabilities to overcome these obstacles, financial?
The chair is an example of, someone competing at the top of the elite sport at the world-class level. We are working with suppliers across the country. We're working with corporate sponsors and with the government support to help with the accessibility to further equipment for children and schools, community centers. So that's going on right now, and these are much more affordable in terms of access and being able to for an average family to pay for that.
Thank you, Mr. Dubé. Ms. Grewal.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, and thank you very much for your time and your presentations. Well, I think I can speak for everyone who's present here when I say how proud I was of our Canadian athletes during the Vancouver Winter Olympics. As a BC MP, it was particularly satisfying to witness so close at hand when our athletes showed to the world that we are home to one of the world's topmost athletes. Well, from history, we know that Canada cannot expect to take in such a large medal haul during the Summer Games. Still, I know that our athletes will make us proud. My question concerns On the Podium. So this is an important program that is helping to build a world-class national sports system, so one that will help Canadian athletes succeed at the highest level. So to your knowledge, how is the On the Podium assisting our athletes, and will it make a difference to the results we see this summer in London? Maybe one of you can answer that.
Certainly, the Government of Canada is a proud and founding partner in the On the Podium initiative, which began, as you point out, in the lead up to the Vancouver Games. It has recently been incorporated as a national non-profit corporation, so there's certainly a strong commitment to ensure its continuity. The Government of Canada is the largest funding provider of the resources that Own the Podium makes recommendations against. There's about 85% of the funding that Own the Podium recommends is actually from tax base. I know colleagues around the table could actually speak to the important impact that those funding envelopes have actually provided to assist preparations for both Vancouver and London. And certainly the Government of Canada sees that this is an important initiative to continue based on the very successful track record we have so far, and we're optimistic that we'll achieve our goals in London as well.
And how many Paralympic athletes will Canada send to the Paralympic Games in London?
We will proudly send 150 athletes to London.
I see. As noted in the Department of Canadian Heritage's report on plans and priorities for 2012 and 2013, the Canadian Olympic Committee and the Canadian Paralympic Committee, in collaboration with the Own the Podium initiative and Sports Canada, they are aiming for almost, I think, top 12 finish in total medals and at the 2012 Olympic Games, and the top 8 finish in gold medals at the Paralympic Games. Well, how confident are you that Canada will reach these goals?
As I mentioned, the trajectory on the summer side is certainly improving. Our medal tallies from Sydney, from Athens, from Beijing are all on an upswing. We certainly are optimistic that the recent additional investment in summer sport will pay dividends. As you mentioned, top 12 is the target. That will probably require in the range of 20 to 25 medals. It's difficult to say exactly on the Olympic side, and on the Paralympic side, we're probably looking at 35 to 45 medals, again depending on the distribution of medals from other countries, and a top 8 finish is ambitious but achievable. The Paralympic side, and Henry can comment on this too, is becoming much more competitive. I mean, Canada was an early, I think, entrant into the Paralympic sport world, but more and more countries are investing more. There's much more competition for those scarce medals, and certainly it won't be easy for us in London, but we believe our athletes are well prepared to actually take that challenge on.
And have preparations for these Paralympic Games been different than those in earlier games?
Henry, maybe you can jump in here. I think certainly the investment in the athletes and programs, the coaching, the training competition, the sports science and medicine is at an all-time high. There's more and more sophistication in terms of the planning and preparation for these athletes. We do have, as I mentioned earlier, we had one athlete win 10% of our medals in Beijing. She's now retired, so unfortunately the depth of field in some of these Paralympic events is not as great as it might be in able-bodied sports, and I know that's a challenge that Henry and his colleagues are working on to try and encourage as many young Canadians that would be interested in participating in Paralympic sport across both winter and summer. But it is certainly a challenge recognizing that some of these athletes only come to sport quite late in life through tragic accidents or through coming back from war-torn areas, etc. So it's a little more difficult in terms of having that pipeline of athletes to supply our future national teams. But as I said, we're feeling quite confident that we're very prepared for London.
Thank you, Ms. Grewal. Ms. Tsubaisu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you again for joining us today. Last week we had the High Commissioner from England here talking about the London Games, and what key underpinning that he talked about was the importance of a legacy and what the Games mean beyond the Games. And for that, I guess my question would be to Lane, Mr. McAdam, or whoever else would like to add. What is it that we are doing to prepare for that legacy? What is that legacy, and what are we doing to, this is of course talking about the Pan Am Games, because I know it's being hosted in Toronto. It's smaller scale than the Olympics would be, but still important for communities like mine in Scarborough. What are we doing to build that legacy? What is our legacy going to be? And are we focusing on building in our communities, investing in our local communities around where the games are going to be held? For instance, we spoke earlier and you mentioned the pool that's being built in Scarborough. It's great. What are we doing to build the communities or invest in the communities around the Pan Am Games?
Well, thank you for your question. Certainly the Pan Am Games are an exciting opportunity for Canada to continue its strong tradition of hosting major multi-sport events. And certainly we've seen the impact that legacies will have. I mean, you will know that certainly on our winter programs, a lot of the athletes that succeeded in Vancouver trained on the facilities that we built 22 years ago in Calgary. And through some foresight of early planners then, there was legacy funds put in place to ensure that those facilities would continue to operate and not be a burden and not, be white elephants afterwards. So we've certainly learned from that. We've certainly learned from other major events, whether it's the Victoria Commonwealth Games, whether it's the games in Vancouver, where there are legacy funds in place. So there's about $400 million of public investment going in to create facilities for the games at all levels. There's the three key legacy facilities that are being planned by the Government of Canada include the Scarborough Swimming and Aquatic Centre, a velodrome in Milton, and a athletics facility at the University of York University. And there is a plan in place to ensure that there is a robust fund in place, a legacy fund that will actually serve to actually help with the programming and operating costs of those facilities post-games. And I'd like to also point out that we don't have the luxury in Canada of having these dedicated facilities only for high-performance sport. They must serve other purposes. So the Aquatic Centre in Scarborough is a perfect example where it will serve growing community needs in the area, which is growing by leaps and bounds in terms of population growth, but will also serve the growing university community. So the combination of local university and high-performance use will make this facility very vibrant in the community, and hopefully allow swimmers from all ages to train alongside national heroes, but also ensure that those Learn to Swim programs for moms and tots are also made available.
Did anybody else want to add to that at all?
From my perspective, in terms of the Paralympic and the Pan Am Games in Toronto, that is a huge opportunity for us to ensure accessibility of all facilities are first class, and that legacy opportunities go beyond facilities into more volunteers, more athletes, more coaches, all of these things at which we have our eye on and are working in partnership with the Toronto 2015 Pan Am Games Secretariat and Organizing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, to me, I call that the 7-Eleven sports hubs. I think when you build facilities in local communities, families don't have to ship their good kids away to go and train all over the country. They could dream at home, sleeping in their own bed and so on. I think that's it's a huge strength in these infrastructure concept in local communities.
Thank you. So like you mentioned, Mr. Storgard, about the accessibility of the facilities, are we also thinking of accessibility to the facilities? So ensuring that there's good transit, public transit that's available, that people of all abilities will be able to access these facilities that we're building? Because right now we don't have that in Scarborough.
No, that's absolutely right. It's not only the facility that has to be accessible, but accessing it. You can imagine, a wheelchair team trying to get to a facility. It requires special transportation requirements. So all of this will be built in the Toronto and Southern Ontario environment and environs, and so that'll be a great legacy for people with a disability, Canadians with a disability. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Mr. McAdam, if you can add if there is anything being planned for accessible transit to access, for example, the Scarborough facility.
Sure. In fact, my understanding is that Scarborough facility is actually being built way beyond the code requirements in terms of accessibility, taking into account experience from the local sport Paralympic community around. I mean, there's certain widths of doorways that are minimum code, but they're actually going beyond that and actually hoping to attract some national team programming
Sorry.
that will occur.
Sorry, I meant access to the facility,
Thank you,
not
Ms.
in the
Sitzabase.
facility. Thank you. Sorry.
Mr. Hillier.
During your comments, Mr. Storgard, you said, "We're not going to London for a hug, but to win." And I thought that was nice, and I'm happy to hear it. And Mr. Lafontaine, you talked about the fact that Canada has the right attitude towards winning, not a kumbaya kind of mentality where we're just having fun here. And I agree with that sentiment, not just at the Olympic level, but I think even as at the kid level, it's good for kids to know that winning isn't everything, but it matters. Otherwise, what are we doing? However, I wonder how to guard against, especially at the young ages, the type of coaching that we see, unfortunately, too often, where, you know, even at 8, 9, 10 years old, hockey coaches, and these are in community leagues where it's not like AAA where you had to try out to get there, but everyone gets on the team. They're pulling kids off after one shift up the ice. They pull them back off, and that's their shift for the period. I've seen coaches, for all intents and purposes, benching their poor players during practices so they could focus on the good players. And I can see their ideas. I'm developing these star players so that they can go somewhere. So how can we maintain this attitude of we're doing it for a win and not for a hug? We're doing this with the right attitude towards winning without missing the mark.
I do think that the last few years there have been a lot of work done with the coaching education. You know what? We can't touch every one of those coaches and change them. Some of them have been coaching for a long time, but I do think through the long-term athletes development model that we've put together now for 10 years. Again, I think it's federal government or Sports Canada that took the lead, saying, you know what? Every sport, if you're going to be sponsored by us, you need to put this into place. And so I do think that there's been some great forward stride now in making sure that it's not just about winning, but it's about creating an environment where every kid wins. And by the way, if there's a good one, there's also a pathway for him to be great.
In the Paralympic community, we operate at both ends of the spectrum. So our mandate is to field the Canadian Paralympic team going to Paralympic Games and to bring the best of the best to that arena. And so the coaches at that level, of course, are very elite, very focused on gold medal performance. At the other end of the spectrum, we're just trying to get children with disabilities out into the playground. And certainly the messaging there is just to encourage recreation, to encourage sport, to give them an opportunity to create friends on the playing field. It's completely a different system. So I understand exactly what you're saying, and we're working, I think, collectively our hardest to ensure that those volunteer recreational coaches are conveying the right messages and the right tone and providing the right support for our children.
Thank you. Mr. Lafontaine, you talked about having a national vision of Canada being the fittest country in the world, and that there's no reason that we can't not just have that vision but obtain that goal. As you know, conservatives often are concerned about cost. Besides the power that will have for national unity and a sense of national pride, can you maybe talk about the impact of such a mentality, or such, I don't want to call it a policy, but such a vision that it can have on the healthcare crisis that we're not talking about very much, but if something isn't done about our healthcare system, we're going to run out of money.
I'm not going to, I'll respond quickly, but I'll pass on to Chris. Chris has a lot more statistics on that. I could tell you that the investment in fitness today will help us tomorrow in the healthcare program. There's no question. Research has been done. We all know it. But more than anything, I think it's the health, the mental health that sports bring to people, the building of confidence. And we're not really about the sports business. We're about the people business, creating leaders. That's the business we're in, with all the skills that are learned through our medium that happens to be, and I would say similar to spelling bee. When these kids stand up and they build their confidence, that's our medium is sport, and I think that's what we're about. You know, somebody's going to say to me, yeah, but it's going to cost us more for new hips and new knees or something like that. And I say, well, then start swimming. This doesn't really affect the hips and the knees. But, but more than anything, you know, the offshoot of a great vision, I think, is pride. And you can't put a price on pride. You can't put price on what it does to family. And I'm not sure we even know the effect of the long-term positive effect of fitness when we have people are 60 and 70 years old learning new skills and feeling great about themselves. So we are about building people through our sports.
Mr. Hillier, sorry, the 5 minutes goes pretty fast. So, Mr. Dubé.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman. Further point I'd like to raise, perhaps stemming from a comment made by Mr. Brown, with the follow-up we offer to athletes after the games, let's say. I think athletes are just as affected by people like Sidney Crosby or Tiger Woods, who are, pretty big earners. Professional athletes, if you will, and perhaps there's not envy, but there's some admiration for that potential. What are we doing to help our athletes bridge the gap once they've finished with the Olympic circuit? They're representing our country abroad and everything else. What can we do to help them get on with their lives? They're not coming back, enriched in a material sense, as we see from these megastars such as Tiger Woods and others.
I do play other sports and involved in other sports, and I think there's a strong commitment in the sport community to ensure that the education. We always encourage our athletes to go to university or college while they're going. We provide support mechanisms. Rugby has two sides. On our men's side, we have a number of our athletes are professional and they go on, but they don't make very much money by North American standards. But on the female side, it's a strong encouragement to be involved in the community. I know that we have a centralized program in the city of Victoria and the city of Langford, and we encourage our athletes there to engage with the community, to do things that are their passion, that may be in fact their vocation after they're done playing the sport of rugby. But the reality is it's just really working with the athlete and knowing what they're trying to achieve. And in some cases, and this is probably hard for an athlete to hear, it's also working with the athlete to let them know when they should probably leave the sport and to focus on their career. Some athletes tend to stay involved in the sport too long, which does in fact hamper their ability to re-engage into their career path.
L'autre question que j'aurais, puis c'est un peu ouvert.
Another question, a broad question to any of our witnesses. It's an issue I raised with some of your colleagues and counterparts a week or so ago. Many of our female athletes have had a lot of success. Mr. Montopoli, you talked to us about the stars that we have with our soccer team in rugby as well, and there's Madame Petitclerc, obviously. I think Canada is much of a pioneer in this respect for women's engagement in sport. What are you doing to make sure that we stay at the head of the pack as far as women in sports?
Observation on behalf of one of my members of the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport. And I think what they would tell you probably is that while the access to the sport at the intake level is getting better and better all the time, there continues to be an issue around, say, representation in the governance and on the boards of directors and those kinds of things where perhaps not enough women are present hence there aren't as many role models or people that the women and young girls can look to. So I think that is something that she continues to work on and is seeking to augment, because there is still work to be done in that area.
Maybe I can add just on Canadian Soccer Association, where our players, once they graduate from our national team program, can enter into coaching programs. Some have been very successful in broadcasting careers, some members from the Oakville Soccer Club who are now female broadcasters on the national platform. Also, from the FIFA Women's World Cup 2015 perspective, which we are hosting, we'll be introducing women in coaching programs, women in leadership positions, and additional referee programs for women within our sport. Also, we have implemented a new governance model whereby we have just elected 3 new women to our board of directors, which again falls in with what Chris was just mentioning, additional enhancements in governance. So I think from a sporting perspective, I think all sports are looking at this, and from our soccer perspective, we're looking forward from a female side as we are world leaders in the sport.
Finally, Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also want to thank the witnesses for being here with us today. I understand we have altogether 150 athletes and about 40 coaches that will be attending these Paralympic Games. I'm wondering if you can tell us how many different competitions will Canadian athletes be participating at the Paralympics?
At the Paralympics, different competitions. Boy, I don't have that right off available right off tongue right now. But I would say we're 12. Okay, sorry.
12.
Sorry, I apologize. I thought you meant like every level and classification. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Are there going to be competitions that Canadian athletes are going to be participating for the first time in the Paralympics?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And can you tell us what those might be?
Well, I have 150 athletes attending. I'm sorry, I'm not fluent with the ones that will be competing for the first time. I'm not fluent in their names and at this point in time.
Those are obviously...
I can get back to you on that.
If you could, that would be great. And the other question that I had, I'm not sure if you have the answer to this. I'd like to know if there are competitions that Canadian athletes are not participating in, and maybe a reasoning as to why, what we may be lacking as to how we can improve on that and maybe prepare for future Paralympics and our athletes. So they're prepared to participate in the competition that we're currently lacking in.
In terms of the competitions that we're not competing in, that's probably about 2/3 of the events and opportunities to compete. So we're not competing in 2/3. The reason for that is multifold. One, that perhaps a Canadian Paralympic athlete did not make the qualifying standard to attend the Games. So we're under the same, exact same rules and regulations as the Olympic athletes in terms of game standards. There may be cases in some sports and some activities that we've not had the funding to develop that particular sport or that particular team in the past few years, and so simply we just don't have a team or athletes that are at a world elite level of competition. So there's a whole range. It would be the same as in the Olympic Games where not every slot is filled.
Thank you. One of the other committees that I personally sit on is Health Committee, and in Health Committee we recently studied the importance of healthy lifestyle and preventing chronic disease. How active are your organizations in promoting fitness and physical activities to Canadian and especially to Canadian youth? Maybe all of you or some of you have the opportunity to answer that.
Right. Well, I also wear another hat. I'm temporarily running a sport called an organization called Physical and Health Education Canada, whose primary vocation actually is to get children and youth active in sport. So I'd say we do it in a kind of mixed way across the country. There's some areas that are effective at it, some school boards more committed to it than others. But I think it's still a patchwork, and I think a lot of kids go without what they should be getting in terms of physical activity and access to sport and recreation. I think some of the NSOs, it varies too as to how well kids are brought in at the intake level. Some do it very well, others probably could still improve it. But back to your point about the links, I think what we're seeing is that the habits that are formed in early years persist into adulthood. And if that kid is sedentary, and we know that 25% of a kid's day these days is spent in front of a screen, that those behaviors begin to manifest as chronic illness later in life. And there's clearly a lot of evidence about the prevalence of type 2 diabetes, about a number of issues that could have been prevented. And I think just one final point I would make, and is that we put together a graph which showed that the cost of swimming lessons for 1 year for a child is about $360, and the cost of treating diabetes for 1 year for a kid who's got that is about $15,000 a year to the Canadian healthcare system. So clearly, if we could get more kids in the pool, we'd probably have fewer coming up with some of these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Gill, and we'll end on that note. So I want to thank all of our witnesses. Very interesting discussion today, lots of questions, lots of answers, and we appreciate all that you're doing for sport. We have another committee that's coming in now, so we'll have to vacate this room, but thank you all, and meeting is adjourned.